Well, here we are. It's April. It's wet outside, those April showers, so I'm in the shed instead of being outside working at the woodpile today. And I began to think a little bit. And when I think, there's two things that I usually like to do. I was thinking about why don't many people think much about COVID and the mandates, the Ukraine war, this fraudulent trade war. Why are people not thinking? And whenever I start to think about subjects, I generally light up a smoke and get my notepad and my pen, and I start to jot down things and start thinking deeply about them. And as I was doing this, something popped into my mind. The two things that I really like to do when I want to think about something are not very common anymore in our society. First off, smoking. Well, that's been vilified, and you are ostracized if you're a smoker these days. In addition, the government has made it very, very expensive to smoke, unless you're close to a native reserve. They've also made it very limited where you can smoke. And they also no longer teach cursive writing in our schools. And I thought, why, isn't that a coincidence? The two things that I like to do when I'm thinking are, most people are either unable to do cursive writing now, many people anyway, and many people have bought into and believe and are full-on anti-smokers and find this to be a nasty, offensive, dirty habit. So that was sort of interesting. The two things that I'd like to do, to think, are not available to many people. And as I was thinking and writing down things, I was thinking, what else might be elements, factors in why Canadians don't think very much these days. They just sort of respond and react in an emotional way rather than a thinking way. And I went back to my time many, many years ago. I took the family and the kids to the Toronto Zoo. And when we got to the zoo, one of the first exhibits that I saw was the polar bear exhibit. And there was this magnificent polar bear. First time I'd ever seen a polar bear in real life. And it was in this cage. And the cage had been set up to sort of replicate its natural environment, I guess. There was a nice pool full of water there. And I was watching this polar bear. And it was walking along the ledge of the pool. And it would walk down this well-worn path, this ledge. Then it would stop. Then it would turn around and it would walk back to the other end of the ledge. Then it would stop, turn around, and walk again. And I was there for about a half an hour watching this polar bear, just like a robot, walking back and forth from A to B on this well-worn path. Like I said, I watched this magnificent beast for about a half an hour to see if it would do something different. But no, it just continued. So after about a half hour, I left and we went around and looked at the other cages and the other exhibits. because it was the first time I'd been to a real zoo. So after whatever it was, 5 or 6 hours at the zoo, it was time for us to leave, and we went back, and I went specifically back to the polar bear cage to see what this magnificent beast was now doing 4 or 5 or 6 hours later. And there he was, still walking on this well-worn ledge, this rut from A to B and B to A and on and on. And of course I was saddened to see this magnificent animal leading a meaningless, leading a unnatural existence. And it struck me and stayed with me for 40 years. So as I was writing and smoking and thinking about the lack of thinking in our society today, the story of the polar bear reemerged from my memory banks. And I thought, isn't that polar bear story such an apt analogy for so many people in our society today? Those many Canadians, many Westerners who live in their densely packed urban zoo, which we call cities, who get up in the morning at point A. Maybe they take the subway, maybe they take a bus, and they go to point B. And then they turn around and go back from point B to point A. And they do this day in and day out, day in and day out, back and forth from A to B. Now, they may have a little stopover or break somewhere, I guess, along the way. But just like the polar bear, A to B, leading a meaningless, unproductive life inside this human zoo we call cities. And unlike me, they can't have a smoke, and they don't have a notebook to jot down and think about what they're doing, and they just plod along. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed my little chat from the shed. Make sure to follow me on Substack, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. And hopefully the April showers will be ending soon, and I'll be able to get back out to the woodpile and share a few more thoughts as I take a deep drag and get my pen out and do a little cursive writing about what's going on in our society today. Till next time, have a lovely day.